for the November 19th meeting of the Murfreesboro City Council. Mr. Bill Shacklett, I'm going to turn over the prayer and the pledge. You I think you have a visitor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Monica Seiler from the Salvation Army is here tonight, Captain Monica Seiler, and she's got some good news about Salvation Army and their ministry here in our community, and then she's going to do the opening prayer for us. Monica?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. I run the Salvation Army here in our county along with my husband, and we have lots of programs going on. Our store has been closed for 5 months due to the severe storms that blew through at the end of June, and we're opening on Saturday, and we're thankful for that because that helps us to raise revenue for our shelter. And I just wanted to update you on what we're seeing in our homeless shelter. We have a 34-bed homeless shelter, which also doubles for the past 2 years as a third shift sheltering program. So folks who are coming to our community on Greyhounds or hitchhiking and having no plan but are able-bodied and working are able to stay with us for 10 weeks to save money and to get their own place and to move out. And that's going very well as our sheltering for men. Where we're struggling right now is in the family portion of our shelter, as folks are having a difficult time finding affordable housing. And so we're looking at whether or not we should extend how long they can stay with us, or what we should do to meet the need that is in the community. We also are in full Christmas force, so our bell ringers will be out in full force all around town in about 30 locations, and that's our largest fundraiser of the year besides our store, and we're hurting this year with the storm. So I encourage you to be kind to the bell ringers who are out there, and if you have any issues with them, let us know. But this year we are taking care of 887 children in our community for Christmas. And this isn't just people who need Christmas help. All of the families who come agree and attend classes during the year that teach them parenting skills and also teach them goal setting and financial planning. And after 3 years, they're not allowed to come to us for help because we think that after 3 years, they should be able to save enough money or to do what they need to do to take care of the needs that they have as a family. And so that's mainly what we're dealing with right now. Our Career and College Ready program, which a lot of people don't know about, has seen 2 girls go to college and have received scholarships. One's at Baldwin Wallace in Cleveland, and the other one is at UT Chat. And so we're very excited with the success, all of those programs. So again, thanks for the invitation, and thank you for your support of the Salvation Army here in our fine community. Will you pray with me? Dear Lord, thank you for who you are. Thank you that you are in control. Thank you that you hold the world in the palm of your hand and that you know the end of the story, that you see what's happening, and that you have a plan even when we don't understand. And so, Lord, I pray for decisions and discussion that will occur tonight in these chambers. Lord, I pray that you will be glorified in it. Lord, I pray that those who serve our fine city will do so with good motives. Lord, I pray for the most vulnerable citizens in our community. Lord, that you would help them to know that they belong to a brotherhood of the city of Murfreesboro. And I pray that you will give them hope and a chance to succeed in life. So, Lord, of everything that's going to happen tonight, Lord, I just pray that you will be pleased. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council members, we have the great opportunity to present a STARS Award tonight. So I want to ask Mr. Godwin if you'll come to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland, and good evening, members of Murfreesboro City Council, also employees in the audience and special guests. I have the distinct privilege and high honor this evening to introduce to you our next STARS Award winner. And our next STARS Award winner is Captain Robert Canterbury of the Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue Department. I'd like to read the narrative that was submitted by Public Information Officer Ashley McDonald. Robert Canterbury had just pulled in the driveway Saturday, November 14th, when he heard a terrible crash out in front of his house on Highway 269. He saw where an SUV came to a rest in front of a tree at the end of his driveway. He could see fire coming from the motor compartment and could tell that at least one person was pinned in that vehicle and another in the other vehicle. He immediately called 911 to report the accident and ask for help, but he also jumped into action. He and his family started bringing buckets of water out to the car that was on fire, trying to douse the flames. He knew he had to get the male driver out, and he and another man tried to get the door off the vehicle, but were unsuccessful. Bobby went to his shop, got his tractor and chains, and went back to the vehicle. He hooked the chains to the door, snatched the door with the tractor for a few times, and got it off. They were able to get the man out to safety before the passenger side of the vehicle caught fire. The other vehicle was a young woman around 18 years of age. She was pinned as well and in and out of consciousness. Bobby assisted with patient care until EMS and the fire department came on the scene. Life Flight was eventually dispatched to take the young woman to Vanderbilt. Bobby was off duty, but his firefighter instincts and quick thinking allowed him to assist citizens in need. This was a great reflection of his personal character and also the professionalism of the men and women of the Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue Department. At this time, I'd like to invite Chief Mark Folks to the podium along with Mayor McFarland to make the formal presentation. Chief Folks.
Bobby, come on over. Bobby exemplifies the courage and the care for our citizens that every member of our fire and rescue service do. And he put his life on the line on this day to save the lives of others. And Bobby, I really, really appreciate you doing that. I've also, on behalf of the Murfreesboro Fire Department, got a meritorious service coin for you, Bobby. This is to anybody in meritorious service or risking their lives to save others, as well as a letter of commendation.
I would ask if it's possible, if Bobby, if your family would stand up, who's here also? Yeah, thank you. Okay. That's it.
I'm embarrassed about all the attention, but there were other people there that were helping assisting, and I didn't do anything that none of my coworkers weren't done if they've been in the same circumstance, so thank you.
Thank you. And so I think we have wife Angela and James, is that right? Jake. All right, Jake, I know you got to be proud of your dad, aren't you? All right. Thank y'all very much. Thank y'all for coming. All right, we'll move into the consent agenda. You've got several items before you on the consent agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. That's right.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We'll move into minutes. We have the October 15th, 2015 regular meeting, the October 22nd, 2015 regular meeting, the 29th special meeting, October 29th regular meeting, November 2nd, 2015 special meeting, November 5th, 2015 special meeting, and the November 5th, 2015 regular meeting. Do we have any additions or deletions to the minutes?
Mayor, seeing no additions or corrections from staff or the council, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Moving to second readings, consider for passage on second reading ordinance 15064, amending Chapter 12 Fire Prevention, Section 1227, Seasonal Use of Fireworks.
Move for passage on second reading.
Second.
Motion and second.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Consider for passage on second reading ordinance 150Z54 to zone approximately 58.7 acres for Valley Brook located along Compton Road as planned residential development simultaneous with annexation 2014-432 Green Trails and Kevin Estes applicants.
Move for passage.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Consider for passage on second reading ordinance 150Z55 to zone approximately 6.1 acres located along Roxborough Court as single-family residential 10 RS10 district simultaneous with annexation Zolt and Renee Mueller applicants.
Move for passage on second reading.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move into new business, and we'll conduct a public hearing and consider for approval of certificate of compliance for Joey Apowonics, Jeff Apowonics, and Grant Apowonics at In-N-Out Tobacco and Beer, 225 North Rutherford Boulevard, Suite H.
Mayor and Council, this is a new location at 225 North Rutherford Boulevard for a beer store, and this is a application where it starts with us with a public hearing. Once y'all approve it, if you do, it moves on to the state level before a retail package store could be opened there. The background checks have met the requirements.
Okay. We'll read the rules for our public hearing. If you will come to the podium if you have something to speak either for or against. If you'll limit your comments to 3 minutes if you're speaking individually, 5 minutes if you're speaking to a group. If you'll address all comments to the City Council, and if there's any questions, we'll get those addressed by staff at the end of the public hearing. And if you can, we'll allow to speak one time per person. We'll open this public hearing. Seeing no one, we'll close this public hearing and consider this certificate of compliance.
Ms. Wright, everything's in order except the state permits.
Yes, sir. We went over any of the conditions we were unclear about with the legal department and was assured that this application is in order, and their next step will be with the State of Tennessee ABC Board.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now move into Resolution 15R-PH58, adopted by the City Council on October 15, 2015, to conduct a public hearing to consider a proposed amendment to rezone approximately 3.4 acres along Lytle Street from Highway Commercial CH District and General Office Residential OGR District to Planned Institutional Development PND District. Rutherford County Government Applicant 2015-424. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 2nd, 2015 issue of a local newspaper. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland, and good evening, Mayor McFarland and members of the City Council. Our first zoning public hearing tonight is a rezoning request for the Rutherford County Judicial Center and the associated parking garage with that facility. The subject property is currently zoned a combination of CH, Commercial Highway, which is the area colored in orange on the map on the screen, and OGR, General Office District Residential, which is the area colored in purple on the map in front of you. The proposed use of the Judicial Center and the parking garage are not allowed by the, would not be allowed in the manner that the county wishes to develop it in the zoning districts that are in existence right now. And so the applicants, the county, have made a request to rezone the property to PND which stands for Planned Institutional District. I'll orient you to the property a little bit further. The property is bounded on its east side by North Church Street, and this is the block where the actual Judicial Center building will be. It's bounded by North Church Street, West Burton Street, East Lytle Street, and North Maple Street. Where the parking garage will be located is bounded by North Maple Street, West Lytle Street, and North Walnut Street. The parking garage location is where the old D&J offices were located up until recently, and they were demolished. The Judicial Center location is where there were a collection of commercial buildings that were recently demolished as well, where the Moab store and the convenience market as well. The southeast corner of the tract where the Judicial Center will be located is where the current drug court building is located. That drug court building will remain at its present location. That building will stay, and it will be a part of this P&D zoning request. So as I mentioned, the county wishes to develop the Judicial Center and the parking garage, and they wish to develop it in an urban manner with limited setbacks and on a very pedestrian-oriented scale, something that will fit in well with the downtown. So as we were discussing this with the county and with their design team, and we were discussing the zoning and how the current zoning would not facilitate the development as they have proposed, we discussed various zoning districts, including possibly the Central Business District. However, with the Central Business District, the applicants would still have to come back to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a height variance because there's a maximum building height in the Central Business District of 75 feet. In addition, the Central Business District has no landscaping requirements, and we felt that for a development like this that there should be some minimum landscaping standards set forth. And with the P&D zoning district, the applicants can tailor the zoning to the zoning plan to how they want to develop the property, and yet the city still receives the commitment of quality with regards to architectural materials, landscaping, and just general design. With that being said, I would like to invite Mr. Brick Murphy up to the podium to introduce the project, and Mr. Matt Taylor with SEC will be giving a PowerPoint presentation going into the details of the project in greater detail. And I, as well as the design team, will be happy to answer any questions either before or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm Brick Murphy of the law firm of Murphy & Murphy. Good evening, Mayor McFarland, members of the City Council and staff. It's a pleasure to be here tonight on this project. This project has been more than 10 years in the making. The past 2 years, the project has ramped up substantially. I'm sure y'all have followed it in the paper and those sorts of things. But I'm going to do a brief introduction, and Matthew's going to walk you through the specifics, and our design team will be here at the end to answer questions. The properties in question are 2 lots diagonal on Lytle Street. They're approximately 3.46 acres. As Matthew mentioned, it's a judicial building, which is our courthouse that's proposed, and a parking garage. Currently, the property is zoned a mix of commercial highway and office general, which, as Matthew mentioned, was not suitable for the project that the county is proposing. Our request is to rezone it as a planned institutional district. And I'm going to discuss a couple quick things. When we, about 2 years ago, started moving quickly on this project, we identified a need to have public input. And in doing so, the mayor appointed a design review committee composed of what we would call stakeholders, or people most affected in the public by this project. Members of the bar, members of our Rutherford County judges were appointed, as well as members of Main Street, members from the county commission that were affected in this area, as well as members from the sheriff's department. This design review committee met 5 times. We've had multiple revisions in terms of architecture, safety features, layout, and we had a lot of public input and comment. Most of it extremely productive, and of all those comments, major revisions took place, and when I reached out to the individuals who had concerns before our Planning Commission meeting, they were all happy. We received unanimous approval at Planning Commission. The only people from the public who spoke were members of Main Street, who were very pleased with the process and the project that's proposed. We also took a tour of the Birch Building in Nashville and got some ideas of the good and the bad. That's a new courthouse in downtown Nashville, relatively new. They refurbished. So we tried to learn from their mistakes, and we tried to build on their successes. Tonight, Matt Taylor is going to walk you through the specifics. He's with the SEC. They've been hired to do the civil engineering for the project. Mr. Adam Nicholson with Gresham Smith, who's our architects on the project, is here tonight as well. Also, Mr. Ken Swan, who's representing us as our owner's rep, is here as well. He's helped us with programming and design. And I just want to say in closing how excited I am to be working on this project. Hopefully this will be the courthouse I practice the rest of my life in, and I really am excited about being before you tonight, and we'll answer any questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Mayor McFarland and members of the council. I'm Matt Taylor of SEC, and I do have a brief presentation to go over some of the more details, the site-specific, if we can put the presentation up. Thank you. We'd like to start with a overall perspective of downtown. This is basically how downtown sits today. You can see City Hall is kind of in the lower right-hand corner. And you've got the city center more up in the upper right-hand corner. And then our parcel is up in the upper left-hand corner. And then this here overlays the proposed judicial on that what is now a vacant tract. You can see that it really bookends the downtown. You got the City Hall and its public plaza on the south side, and then you've got the proposed judicial building with all of its public spaces on the north side. We feel like this is really going to round out downtown extremely well and really complement each other. As Matthew said, this is along Lytle. We've got the garage on the south side and the building itself on the north side. It's a great location. It's got great access to the infrastructure that's needed, and what's deficient is going to be reconstructed and added to with the reconstruction of Lytle Street that the city is currently planning. We've got utilities all the way around us, drainage, and access. All of our access points are proposed to come off of side streets to help maintain the flow and capacity of Lytle Street after its reconstruction. And then one of the large things about the project is the security. It must portray a secure facility, but more importantly, it must actually be a secure facility. One of the key points to portray this is along the north side, along Burton, on the north side of the Judicial Building. There we've planned for some on-street parallel spaces that will be installed with that roadway reconstruction, and that is going to be reserved for Sheriff's Department only. That is for a couple of reasons. It's easy access for them to get in and out in an emergency situation, but it also portrays a very commanding presence on that street, kind of a act of deterrence, if you will. Not that we hope that happens, but do want to plan for it. And then all of our parking, the Judicial Center itself has a subterranean parking garage for judicials and some limited employees that will function there, but the majority of the parking will be across diagonal to the site in the parking garage that we're planning in the old D&J building or building site. This is a perspective looking from the Lytle Street side. You can see it's going to have a very high quality architecture. It's pulling some feels and influences from the downtown and from some of our other historic buildings in our city. All high quality materials, brick, precast concrete, copper patina, and glass. The drug court, because of its potential historic significance is going to remain on the parcel, and we've tried to respect that and separate those two uses via a public park. And the building itself is projected at 6 stories, plus the subterranean garage. And the highest point, kind of that white peak there, is proposed at about 155 feet. And this is just an example. We've projected what that will look like from City's Plaza, right outside of these doors. And you can see it almost mimics the downtown courthouse a little bit, the cupola versus our tower element there. And this is straight on from Lytle Street. You can see some very common elements from the Oakland's Mansion, from the drug court. All those influence the design on the architecture side of this building. This is looking from the northwest corner at the Burton side. And again, you can see it's 4-sided architecture and good quality materials around. Not really going to be a dull place on this building. As you get closer to the building, this is still on the north side. There are elements to the building and to the site with the pedestrian scale lighting, the street trees, and the detailing on the building itself. Still going to maintain a very pedestrian-friendly zone, even though it is a very tall building at 155 feet tall. This just gives you perspective from the dusk. You can tell that it's going to be an interesting building at all times during the day, not just a blank facade, even as you go into the nighttime. Security starts as soon as you walk in the door. You can see this right here is very imposing. Security gates. This has been planned so it's not backing up out on the sidewalk as we see commonplace at our existing facility. The entry stairs as soon as you walk in and go through security. Some very nice views back down over our downtown proper. And very high quality design and materials inside the courtrooms themselves. The parking garage are going to pull all the same type of materials and architectural elements as the Judicial Center. So even though they're on 2 separate corners, you'll be able to tell they are part of the same project. It is proposed right now as a 4-story building. Structurally, and we've requested in the book to be allowed to go up to an additional 2 stories in the future if that need ever arises. It has about 360 spaces inside that garage. The park that I alluded to earlier, you'll see here the existing drug court buildings on the right, proposed buildings on the left. And in between that is a very kind of unstructured park-like setting. We planted some nice trees in there. It's really meant to be an area of refuge, relaxation. This building will be stressful for the occupants in it, and this will hopefully provide not only a place for them, but a place of leisure for the other occupants of downtown. Just another view. This is from the west side as you walk up to the main entrance into the building. And another view as you come from Lytle Street. The project itself, really the project has already kicked off on the demolition side. I'm sure all of you all know that each of the existing buildings, with the exception of the old drug court, have been removed, and the sites have been secured with fencing and erosion control placed up. If the zoning proceeds successfully, we intend to start site work in early 2016, which would have a project completion in 2018. Both the parking garage and the Judicial building itself will open at the same time. There will probably be a delay in start between the 2 buildings, but we'll finish at the same time. And I'll be happy to answer any questions now or after the public hearing.
Questions for Mr. Taylor?
I got one.
Mr. Washington?
All right, Matthew.
Yes, sir.
Before you leave, backup power situation. How you handle that?
I know that they are dual feeding the building from a electrical standpoint. I think it's got feeds from 2 different directions, but I don't believe that there are any life safety items there, so I don't believe that we've got a generator. Is that right?
You don't?
So it's not as sensitive as a hospital per se. You do have a generator?
I get ready to say you do need to have one because regardless of dual feeds, that can.
And they said we do. So.
Oh, they probably do, but you dual feeds can go away. So.
No, I'm sorry. We do have a generator.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. And make sure it's pedestrian friendly because there's gonna be a whole lot of walking up there from the garage to the buildings, and that was basically my only questions about. You don't want people stuck in the garage and stuck in the place and can't get out.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay. All right, we'll open the public hearing and we'll get comments on this rezoning request. Anyone wishing to speak for or against? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading Ordinance 15OZ58 to rezone an area located along Lytle Street to Planned Institutional Development, PND District 2015-424.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Congratulations, team. Pursuant to Resolution 15R-PH62 adopted by the City Council on October 15, 2015, conduct a public hearing to consider a proposed amendment to the conditions applicable to approximately 9.7 acres in Parcel E of the Victory Station Plan Unit Development, PUD, district located along Fortress Boulevard so as to allow an aged assisted care living facility. Murfreesboro AL investors, applicant 2015-420. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 2nd, 2015 issue of a local newspaper. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Our second public hearing tonight is a PUD amendment, property located along the west side of Fortress Boulevard. This may look familiar to you. Just earlier this year, the property to the north, which we pull up the map. Property just to the north where my cursor is which is a part of the same plan development, Victory Station plan development, was amended earlier this year for an assisted living facility / home for the aged. After the property was rezoned to allow for this use, the applicants, in doing their due diligence on the property, discovered the existence of some wetlands, and rather than mitigate those wetlands, which could take an extensive period of time, the applicants have decided to move forward with the property that is before you tonight, which is the area in blue. I will note, however, and the City Council may wish to note as well, that property that we had before us earlier this year in the Victory Station plan development will likely be coming back to you at some point for another amendment, seeing as the requested assisted care living facility is moving to this property. There would likely be no need for the property that was rezoned earlier this year to be developed or to be zoned for an assisted care living facility as well. But the overall subdivision developer, Swanson Development, has not made an amendment request for the portion of the plan development that was zoned earlier this year. Tonight we have the property in blue before us, which is currently zoned for commercial uses, more specifically for retail development with 133,500 square feet of floor area and 445 parking spaces. The applicants wish to amend the plan development for Victory Station to allow the assisted care living facility and home for the aged on the subject property. It is bordered on its west side by a large residential estate lot, on its south side by a commercially zoned property, one parcel of which is developed with an Exxon on-the-run convenience store. To the north, as I mentioned, is the property that was rezoned earlier this year for the same use. And across the street, across Fortress Boulevard, is also property that is located within the Victory Station plan development. It is zoned for a variety of uses, including some commercial uses where the CVS is located across the street, as well as some medical office uses and other light commercial uses directly across Fortress Boulevard at Luke Court. The layout of the subject property is essentially identical to the layout that was proposed on the parcel to the north. And the mix of units would be as follows: 176 dwelling units, including 102 independent living units, 48 assisted living units, and 26 memory care units. This type of facility would allow an individual to be able to move from one type of housing to the next. With that being said, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter on October 7th and unanimously recommended its approval. Mr. Randy Caldwell is in the audience tonight. He is with Reagan Smith and Associates, and he is representing the developers, and he has a brief presentation with regards to this proposal. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
No questions.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Randy Caldwell with Reagan Smith Associates. I also have Mr. Wynn Bishop here tonight with me, who is with Smith Packet out of Roanoke, who is the developer. He was here the last time we were here before you with this project. And again, as Matthew explained, unfortunately, when we got in our due diligence after the zoning, we discovered the environmental issue associated with the property. And rather than mitigate, and also due to kind of the size and the mass of the building, it was just difficult to work around that feature. So fortunately, Smith Packet was very confident, loved the Murfreesboro area, loved this area specifically, and went back to the Swansons, and were fortunate enough to be able to get a contract on the property just to the south, and that's how strong they felt about investing in the Murfreesboro community, and are happy that we can be back before you for another consideration of this plan. As Matthew explained, and this is, I'll try to get to the site plan comparison here. Again, as you can look up on the right there, you'll see up at the top what was previously approved on the Victory Station PUD with a commercial development, and at the bottom you'll see what we are proposing for the property. It's, as Matthew said, very identical to what we had proposed before. 176 units. I do want to clarify something, because I believe we changed the mix on the last, which it's correct in our pattern book, but it is composed of 16 studio units, or 28 one-bedroom, 10 two-bedroom, total of 54 assisted living units, 93 home for the aged, and 29 memory care. So the mix is a little bit different than what Matthew had explained, but still a lot less demand on infrastructure as it relates to traffic, as it relates to parking demand. Still significant amount of open space on this property, very similar to what we had before. So again, just almost exactly what you had seen in our previous effort. Architecture is still all masonry with some residential elements incorporated into that. So what you see is all brick or hardy plank on the facades of that, and that will be all around the building. So still very high quality development, very much a need in the Murfreesboro market. And again, we're pleased that we could come back to you with another site and in the same area too, where they feel there's a significant need for this use there. So again, we're here to answer any questions that you might have relative to our application after the public hearing or now, if you need us.
Any questions for Mr. Caldwell?
And Mayor, the information that you do have in your materials is a little bit outdated. I'll make sure that you have the correct numbers for second reading.
Okay. All right, we'll conduct a public hearing on the Victory Station Partial E PUD amendment. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 15OZ62 to amend the conditions applicable to approximately 9.7 acres in parcel E of the Victory Station Plan Unit Development, PUD District, located along Portage Boulevard, so as to allow an aged assisted care living facility, 2015-420.
Move for passage on first read.
Second.
Motion is second. Shrike?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Item 9, pursuant to Resolution 15R-PH59 adopted by the City Council on October 15, 2015, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning approximately 3.4 acres along Summit Court from single-family residential 15, RS15 district to duplex residential RD district. John Jones applicant, 2015-425. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 2, 2015 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I bring before you tonight an application for zoning change request for approximately 3.4 acres located along Summit Court. Summit Court is a short cul-de-sac street located just off to Jarnett Lane and is adjacent to Oakland Drive, and you can see that on the map before you. This application is being made by, the representative is Mr. John Jones, but it's being made by the property owner, Ms. Norris, who owns the parcel shaded orange on the map before you. This parcel is a two-family dwelling that was constructed in 1980. It is zoned single-family for single-family purposes. The property was later annexed in 1986 and came to the city with an interim zoning of RS15. There was no companion zoning change request when the property was annexed, and because the way the county zoning worked, it was zoned for single-family purposes and came into the city with an interim RS15 zone. Ms. Norris came to staff with her representative, Mr. Jones, and would like to have you consider changing the zone from single-family residential district to RD, which is residential duplex district. The Planning Commission studied the matter and decided to include additional parcels, and those were the blue parcels that you saw on the map. So there are a total of 5 parcels located along Summit Court, which are being recommended to be rezoned from single-family residential district to RD duplex. Of these 5 parcels, 4 have two-family dwellings, and two-family dwellings are duplexes, and 1 has a single-family dwelling. The current zoning is RS15, so if any of these structures that are two-family dwellings were to be completely destroyed, they could not be rebuilt. So zoning these to RD would legitimize what they were originally constructed as. So it's Planning Commission's recommendation that you do consider zoning all these to RD. The property that is single-family dwelling a single-family dwelling is permitted by right in the RD zone, so it can continue to be a single-family dwelling, or they can have the option of converting that to a two-family dwelling. Ms. Norris' parcel is rather large, and she has an interest in subdividing her parcel, and that's what has sparked her to move forward with this. I believe most of these parcels are rental property, and many of the people who live there were unaware that their property actually was not zoned for duplex. They just assumed that the zoning would permit their use. However, of course, it is not. The properties to the north are zoned RS15 in that single-family residential district, as are the parcels to the west. Property to the east is also zoned RS15. However, it's the location of the Oakland High School, which has a special use permit to be there. To the south is property zoned RS12, which is single-family residential district with a different lot size than the RS15 property. Mr. John Jones is here this evening if you have any questions regarding this application. It is Planning Commission's recommendation to you that you do rezone all 5 parcels from their current RS15 zone to RD. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing.
Ms. Green?
Yes, sir.
4 out of the 5 are already duplexes and have been that way for many years.
They are.
Okay.
Any questions for Ms. Green? All right, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing and consider this rezoning. Anyone wishing to speak for or against? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 15OZ59, a rezoning area located along Summit Court to duplex residential RD district, 2015-425. Mr. Lance.
Fran, sorry. Just one thing just struck me. You said 4 out of the 5 lots. Is there a single-family house on one of these?
There is.
And if something happens to that house, will this preclude them from being able to build back a single-family?
Single family is permitted by right within
All
the
right.
RD.
Just want to make sure. Yep. Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Pull the trigger.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Mr. Wright, call the roll.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Pursuant to Resolution 15R PH 61 adopted by the City Council on October 15, 2015, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning approximately 6.6 acres along New Salem Highway from Highway Commercial CH District to Residential Multifamily 16 RM 16 District, Cornerstone Development applicant 2015-421. Notice of said public hearing was published in the November 2nd, 2015 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir. This next public hearing is for you to consider a zoning change request for property that's located along New Salem Highway or Highway 99. This property is identified in the orange color that's before you. Actually, it's a portion of the property. The larger property is zoned RM16 and CH. The request is for you to consider zoning a portion of this property, which is about 6.6 acres from its current CH or Commercial Highway District zone to RM16. You can see that the northern part of these properties are zoned RM16, and that's multifamily residential district, which would allow multifamily units. And the part of the property that's located along New Salem Highway is zoned CH Commercial Highway District. When the developers were considering or contemplating a plan for this property, they realized that they would like for a portion of the multifamily zoning to have frontage along New Salem Highway. So the request that's before you is for you to consider rezoning 6.6 acres from its current Commercial Highway District to RM16. The property to the south is zoned RS15, Single Family Residential District. However, it's the location of the Methodist United Fellowship Church, and it's also the location of the Boxwood Plantation House. The properties to the west are zoned RM16, and that's the location of the Westbury Farms apartment community. And further to the west is the Publix at Salem Shopping Center, which I think we are familiar with. The property to the east is zoned CF, and that's Commercial Fringe District, and is the future location of a Walmart neighborhood market, which isn't the same as a Walmart, but is a smaller version and really is a grocery store. St. Andrew's Place, PRD, Planned Residential District, is located to the north. And you are aware that this portion of 99 or New Salem Highway is on Tennessee Department of Transportation's plan to be improved to a 5-lane highway. That, however, staff is not aware of the time frame for that moving forward. The subject property, as I mentioned, is zoned both CH and RM16. The applicants desire to rezone the 6.6 acres to coincide with an overall development plan, and we've included the 8.5 by 11 example of the overall development plan in the agenda packets. At the Planning Commission public hearing, there were several comments regarding that master plan and some neighbors concerned with the master plan. However, what you're considering tonight is not the master plan. What you're considering is the application to zone that 6.6 acres to RM16. Any review or approval of the master plan is a function of the Planning Commission, and it's under their authority. However, you may remember that there were conversations when this property was initially zoned CH and RM16 that the developers committed to not having a straight shot, as we call it, or a thoroughfare from Mershon Drive to New Salem Highway. However, would design that to have some traffic calming elements and a T intersection, and that's what the Planning Commission reviewed with the master plan. So as I mentioned before, tonight you are considering the rezoning and not the master plan, and I know that there were several calls to my office about that master plan, so I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Matt Taylor is representing the applicant, and I'm going to invite him to the lectern at this moment to provide you with some additional information. I, of course, am available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Green. I will be brief. Our request is really to allow the existing RM16 that is zoned behind the commercial highway to have a front door and a presence out on New Salem Highway. I think you've heard probably a recurring theme over the past 5 years or so that the higher end, higher quality newer, large-scale apartment complexes desire that front door on a main thoroughfare, and so we're just trying to plan for that in the future.
Matt, will there be access from the market into the apartment complex? Will there be other access off of?
From the Walmart neighborhood? There is, I don't believe that they have a direct access. As part of the neighborhood markets plan, the remaining property of the seller there did present a master plan back to the Planning Commission that was approved, and we have tried to align with that master plan and create a stub street that would have the potential to connect back over to Case and Lane. So there's not a direct connection between the neighborhood market and this property.
Is it possible to get another connection to 99?
I think that we have planned for 2 public accesses and then maybe an additional access for maybe a larger tract with shopping center tract with the master plan. And with our traffic study that we did, that was about all we could get there. No more major roads coming in off this portion, I don't believe.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, we'll conduct a public hearing on this rezoning. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 15OZ61 to rezone an area located along New Salem Highway to residential multifamily 16 RM16 district 2015-R21.
Mayor, I'm going to vote for this, and I'm going to make a motion, but I would like to stress to Mr. Taylor how important another access is onto 99. Now, I know you can't do that yet because you don't have a project to work with, but I think that's important to get. That's a long, fairly narrow frontage. And I think if you can get another access out, now here again, you got to go through the state, and I fully understand that, but I think that's important. And it'll come up at the Planning Commission, and hopefully the council will remind you of that also. With that, Mayor, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Pursuant to Resolution 15R PH 57 adopted by the Murfreesboro City Council on October 1st, 2015, conduct a public hearing to consider amending Murfreesboro City Code Chapter 25 1/4, Sections 25 1/4-2, 25 1/4-23, 25 1/4-25, and 25 1/4-29 regarding exempt signs, temporary signs, and certain non-conforming signs, 2015-803. City of the Murfreesboro Legal and Building and Codes Department's applicants. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 2nd, 2015 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland, members of council. Before you tonight, you have a proposed temporary sign ordinance amendment with complete details for revisions to the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance for your consideration and a public hearing. I'm going to briefly highlight the proposed changes which are included in your agenda packet. Staff has been diligently working to revise temporary sign ordinance section of the Murfreesboro sign ordinance, and we have held 3 public hearings, 1 special meeting, and a city bus tour with the Planning Commission members. We have had 2 stakeholders meetings with interested citizens, business owners, and sign companies. We've developed numerous proposed revisions to comprise a cohesive and enforceable temporary sign ordinance section. Staff's initial task was to restructure the temporary sign ordinance to help simplify, add clarity, and reduce confusion to better accommodate businesses, citizens, and sign companies to locate and understand regulations of the temporary sign section. Removal, additions, and restructuring of sections of the temporary sign ordinance regulations has included the definitions prohibited, exempt from permit, violations and penalties, and conditionally allowable temporary signs. We propose to include several new types of signs which have not been addressed or regulated in the past. They include equipment and machinery signs, murals, public art, feather signs, and sandwich board signs. We propose to revise definitions and regulations to existing temporary signs, which include window signs, vehicle signs, inflatable signs, and directional signs. Through meetings with the citizens, business owners, Planning Commission, and staff, there were important revisions made to several types of signs within the temporary sign section, and the significant changes were to include window signs, directional signs, inflatables, feather signs, other temporary signs, and string lighting. The current regulations allow window signs today to be 15% in all zones except CBD, which is allowed 50%. After several revisions to this section, proposed allowable signage would be 25% on all ground floor windows and 15% on all upper floor windows, and all windows on doors would have 2.25 square foot on that window within the door. Also, the use of window frame lighting, whether by continuous strip lighting or by string lighting, illuminating the perimeter of one or more individual window panes, is prohibited. As requested by sign companies, the compromise for directional signs less than 4 square feet in area would not require a date on the event sign, and feather signs would be allowed to be according to industry standards at 14-foot overall height as opposed to 12-foot overall height. The number and regulation of other types of temporary sign will be uniform throughout the city at 3 temporary signs per single lot of record, and all signs will have a 32 square foot display area and a 12-foot overall height. String lighting was prohibited in Murfreesboro except between November 15th and January 15th, and only allowed in commercial highway and heavy industrial zones. The proposed revision would allow for white or clear string lighting all year and colored string lighting from November 15th to January 15th, and it will now be allowed in all zones. Non-commercial inflatables have been added to be allowed in all non-residential zones for 30 consecutive days. And the proposed amendment before you has been unanimously recommended to Council on September 16th. I'm available to answer any questions either before or after the public hearing.
Amelia, it was brought to my attention today that some of the businesses perhaps use string lighting or Christmas-type lighting on some of the plants that they have around their property, or a pot, or perhaps in a window display. And it's colored lighting. It's sometimes they use pink for breast cancer awareness and that type thing. Would that still be permitted?
White or clear would be allowed all year long. The colored, as it's written today, would only be allowed between November 15th and January 15th. But as far as being on their bushes and in their planters and whatnot in front, that would be allowed now.
So it's just if it's in the window?
If it's in a window display area and it's not something that's permanently adhered to a window, this is considered a temporary sign, not something that's supposed to be intended to be a permanent sign.
I had one other question. I just want to make sure I've got this right. Down towards the end, there's a page that says exemptions under section 25 1 1/4-23. And then it goes A, B, and there's a list of 13 things under exemptions. It was
Yes,
one of
sir.
our last things in our package. I just want to make sure that I understand what exemptions are. When it says signs exempt from sign permit or permit fee requirements, does that mean?
We
These-
regulate them, but we do not permit them.
Okay. So they would count toward this. All the things that are in here would count towards the 25% or the 15%, but they're not. They don't need a permit necessarily.
They don't
Is that
need
right?
a permit, no, sir.
Gotcha.
Okay, any more questions for Ms. Kerr? All right, we'll conduct a public hearing regarding amendments to the sign ordinance 2015-803. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium.
My name is Evelyn. Thank you for all hearing me tonight.
Evelyn,
I just wanted to say
Evelyn, if you don't
that
mind giving me your last name and address.
Kivanimi.
Pardon?
Kivanimi.
Okay, and your address?
We are 919 Northwest Broad Street.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I want to say that although this version of the new sign ordinance is so much better than what was originally proposed, as a business owner, I still find it to be burdensome to need to measure my windows before I put signs up. As most people know, we have many, many permanent signs in our windows, and we know that that's grandfathered in. But at the same time, we're also finding, businesses rely on their windows for a lot of their advertising. And of course, the city of Murfreesboro has grown immensely with the revenue from businesses. I mean, 30% of Murfreesboro's income, I believe, is from sales tax revenue. Am I close to correct on that?
38.
All right.
About 30%?
More than that.
Well, we found some studies that showed that businesses that are allowed to have more signs actually create 5% more revenue for the city or county that they live in than businesses that have less signage. I really feel right now that what we're looking at is regulation for the sake of regulation. Amelia and I disagree on what the regulations say now. My attorneys and MTSU English professor says that the regulations read that those businesses that are in the central business district are limited to 15%, but that there currently are no regulations on inside windows outside the central business district. I had the NFIB's Washington attorneys check that for me, and that's the information that they sent back to me, as well as, like I said, I've had it checked at MTSU. So we have a little disagreement on what's there. But having been a business owner in Murfreesboro for 25 years, we've never had anyone at any time come to us, and we checked before we put our murals up on what inside regulations were, and there were none. So I just think that this is going to be burdensome. I don't see how it can be enforced, particularly if we're going to grandfather things in, which I appreciate, but I don't see how you're going to be able to tell unless you take pictures of every window in Murfreesboro and compare it to something later. It just seems to me that we have so many other important things to do that we need to let Murfreesboro businesses continue to grow, continue to generate income for the city without little itty-bitty things to have to be aware of. Every time you have to stop and measure your window space to see if this sign is going to push you over the limit is something that you could be doing more productive to increase revenue, increase job. That's just my opinion. And I would love to see, I know that there have been other meetings on this, but I know that right now I've been very invested and involved in this, and I didn't find out about this meeting until yesterday. And I think most business owners really don't know. We're a week away from Black Friday. So most business owners are not watching the paper to find out if we're going to have to, check our window signs, they're trying to figure out how we're going to get customers in the door for Black Friday sales and how we're going to get our Christmas set going. So if we cannot just dismiss this, I would love to see it pushed out long enough for other business owners to be able to be aware of it and make their opinions known. They might be a little bit more eloquent than I am. So I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, members of the City Council. My name is Christopher Tolbert. I live at 2103 Sherrill Boulevard. My opinions on the matter are I often find myself walking around enjoying the view and the nice architecture within the city, and I find more often than not I find about events, promotions, things that are happening in my community that I often invite other people to through these temporary signs posted up. And I feel that taking away much of the space away from those businesses would not only hurt the businesses themselves, but would hurt just the community in general. I don't own a TV. I read the newspaper when I can, but I get a lot of my information about events going on just from these temporary signs. I can understand that maybe this ordinance was born out of some sort of safety requirement or wanting to make sure that everyone was safe in an event where emergency responders needed to be aware of what was going on inside of a building. But I feel that the regulation has gone just quite too far by really removing much of the signage ability. And I agree with her that much of this regulation is done just for regulation's sake. And I just feel that removing all the signs would greatly hurt not only businesses, but the community in general and events, and really attendance to events. So I feel that keeping the signs up will just keep Murfreesboro being, bustly and enjoyable at night and have a nightlife. And that's really all my thoughts on the matter.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Durand, and I'm here tonight representing the Downtown Murfreesboro Business Association. I'm the president, currently serving. And only thing we have to say is that it still seems to be ambiguous, a bit unclear as to the reason why. And I appreciate the comments regarding the lights. Lots of small business owners have unique features in their architecture, their buildings. I'm in a standalone turn-of-the-century house. There's a charm and appeal in that, and being able to decorate it the way you want to express what your business represents. So of the 88 small business owners that are part of the Downtown Association, I'm just here to say that the sign information is still just confusing to them as to the reason why, and especially when it was related to safety. And I know there's been some immediate changes. I found out about the meeting again this morning, so I don't have, I haven't been able to read what has been changed, although it does sound quite a bit different from the last time we heard it. So on behalf of them, we wanted to let you know.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? We see none. We'll close the
Mayor, before we close the public hearing, I would like to request a deferral of this public hearing so that we can allow for additional input. Found out today that we had actually had the wrong ordinance listed on our website, and I was referring people to that website for the information that we had, and it actually was the August version of that prior to what the Planning Commission had done. So I think that was what was being referred to. Some people, this is the first time that they've seen this document as it is. First, I want to thank all of the folks. I think the Planning Commission, I think our staff, Amelia and Gary and everybody that's had a part in this. I know this is almost a year now that this process, and probably longer than that. It's, you know, a sign ordinance is like cleaning out your closet. It's something you put off and put off and put off, but you've got to do it, because to make it a function and to be something that make it a better place and make the ordinance better, you got to go through there and clean that out every so often and look at how it's actually being fleshed out on the ground. So I appreciate all the effort that's gone into this, but we've finally come to a document that I think is closer to what we can live with as a community. But I think it's, you know, we've gone this far. A couple of extra weeks is not going to be that much put us off, you know, to allow people to kind of digest the document, ask their questions, for us to get some of the questions as to the why of an ordinance. Why are we doing that way? Why do we perceive it that way, and how it's going to flesh out? Because it's hard enough for any of us that have had any kind of experience with reading an ordinance. It's hard to understand. But I can guarantee you, somebody that looks at a sign ordinance for the first time, it becomes a daunting task to kind of read through, especially when we're pulling out certain sections of the ordinance and substituting other sections of the ordinance. It's hard for them to see how that fits together. And I know there's logic to it, but it's hard to see how that fits. So I don't think 2 weeks is going to put us off that much. And then instead of concluding the public hearing at this point in time, I would like to have another opportunity for the public to react, and then have the initial vote on the ordinance in, is it 2 weeks now that we will?
Yes, sir. Obviously, next week is Thanksgiving, so we'll meet the November the 30th, I believe is the date.
If we could put that off for 2 weeks, I would like to propose that.
Dave, Mr. Rice, how do we keep the public hearing open?
Suspend the public hearing? Could we do that?
Well, if we haven't closed the public hearing, I think we can simply basically continue the public hearing, defer it. I'm not sure deferral is quite the right word, but we can continue the public hearing until our next meeting on, if we will meet November 30th.
December 3rd.
I think the appropriate, we wouldn't.
November 30th is a Monday.
December 3rd.
Okay.
I think the appropriate, we would not defer it. We would just table it for right now. So it would just, yeah.
Yeah, certainly defer action on if the public hearing is not yet complete. But I think just to continue the public hearing until our next meeting on
December 3rd.
On December 3rd.
So this could.
How long is the public notice need to be for a public hearing?
Well, I think there's really maybe two ways that you can look at this, because this has come up in the past before. You know, because it's an ordinance, we're required to have a legally advertised public hearing, which we advertised, and that was what was on your agenda this evening. Having said all that, there's nothing to preclude the City Council from saying at its December 3rd meeting, even though you've met the legal requirement for having a public hearing, that you can say to the public and the business community, the first reading of the ordinance is going to be back on the agenda, but we're going to give the public an opportunity to speak on it. You can do it that way, I believe, if you'd like. The legal part about the advertisement and the required days, you've met that. So if you want to, not take action today, we'll put it on the agenda December 3rd, and as part of that agenda, you can ask the public if you want to come forward and speak. They'd have that opportunity. We can make that clear on the city's website, and Mr. Browning can, send out a press release about it. It wouldn't necessarily be what you would consider the legal public hearing, but it's an opportunity for the public to come speak to you.
Clear as mud.
And Mr. Lyons, I believe it would be appropriate to include within the next agenda that we publish to state in the agenda that the public hearing on this matter will be continued. Sure. That way it'll be clear to everybody. And we can do more publicity about it too, but to actually have it as an agenda item, I guess this would be under old business at the next meeting, that we would continue this public hearing on this ordinance amendment and then consider the amendment.
Okay, so I'm going to say that we are going to table this and leave the public hearing open unless there's any issues with the other council members.
I just want to make sure, is there anything, David or Rob, that, mean, from a perspective of leaving a public hearing open, I mean, are we in any kind of situation where, any kind of emails or anything, any correspondence that we might get from the public regarding this matter, while technically the public hearing is open, or is it by being tabled? Are we? I don't want to get information from citizens. I guess what I'm saying, let me say it this way: I don't want to get information from citizens, and that somehow should technically be part of the record, when obviously we can't really do that, I guess, is my only worry.
I think that the communication, whether it's by letter or phone or fax or email or whatever it is, any communication to you on this matter would be treated the same way it would have been if you had received an email on it yesterday or last week.
I'm talking about verbal.
But the fact that the public hearing is still open, I don't think impacts that at all.
Okay, good.
That's just information, communication from your constituents to you, which is certainly allowed, and you will consider that then, and then it'll affect you however it does.
Okay.
Or not at all. There'd be no difference.
Staff has made the correction, by the way, so if you have not seen or don't have access to the sign ordinance, it is now on the website.
Correct. My understanding was the sign ordinance was in two places. In one location, it was the correct version. In the second location, it was the older version.
Okay. Well, I think you'd said it was going to be on the front page now.
Yes.
There'll be some kind of notice, public notice put there, so you can, if you get to the front page of our website, the city's website.
We'll make it easy for people to find.
You can find it. So,
I'm going to make one more comment about this, and then I'll follow up on his motion, but as you read through this stuff, I want to tell you guys especially, I mean, a sign ordinance is not something that's going to be extra simple. I mean, just the very nature of it is going to be, it is really complex. And the reason that it is typically complex is because we're trying to be accommodative on a lot of levels. You can't treat this building exactly the same as you treat some other type of building, which is the other type of building, which is the same as the other. I mean, we try to make it as uniform as we can, as fair as we can, but they all aren't shaped the same way. They all have the same amount of windows, the same amount of siding. I mean, it's a difficult thing. So it's not going to be something that's going to be a two-paragraph thing. So in any instance, but I appreciate what staff has done, but because of the reasons Bill has outlined, I'll second his motion, and we'll come back to this in 2 weeks.
Okay,
if so voted.
I don't think we need a motion, so we're going to table it.
You don't.
All right.
Okay.
You don't.
All right, we'll move to recommendations as a principal planner, contract with Reagan Smith Associates to conduct a small area study and develop a land use plan for the Highland Avenue Cultural Arts District.
Thank you once again, Mayor McFarland. We bring to you tonight a contract for Reagan Smith Associates for what we are coining the term the Highland Avenue Cultural Arts District. The proposed Highland Avenue Cultural Arts District consists of a variety of land uses, including a mix of commercial uses on its west end, office uses on its north end, and a variety of multifamily and single-family residential parcels throughout. The area is roughly bounded by East Clark Boulevard on the north, Northwest Broad Street on the west, East College Street on the south, and Middle Tennessee Boulevard on the east. Staff wishes to work alongside Reagan Smith Associates to conduct a small area study and develop a land use plan for the Highland Avenue Cultural Arts District. The study and resulting plan will address current and potential land uses, economic impacts and incentives, and potential infrastructure improvements. With increasing interest in living and working in or near downtown, the purchase of the former Middle Tennessee Medical Center property by Middle Tennessee State University, the construction of the Rutherford County Judicial Center, staff believes this is an opportune time to study this area. In addition, with the relocation of the hospital, this study will provide an opportunity to review areas that have historically been used for medical purposes and to determine how these properties might best be used in the future. Funding for this project will come from the Planning Department's budget for the fiscal year 2015-2016 and the projected fiscal year 2016-2017 budget. $75,000 has been budgeted for this project in the current fiscal year. It is the recommendation of administration and the planning department that the contract for professional services to conduct a small area study and to develop a land use plan for the Highland Avenue Cultural Arts District area to be approved by the City Council. This approval will authorize the mayor to execute the necessary contract documents contingent upon the legal department's review and approval. Now, as an aside, I did want to mention that recently the Murfreesboro 2035 plan, the draft economic development chapter, was put out, and one of the key strategies in this chapter that was outlined was reinvestment and revitalization of the downtown areas. And so this small area study will work towards this goal that the Murfreesboro 2035 plan is advocating. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Randy Caldwell with Reagan Smith Associates is in the audience if you have any questions for him, as is Mr. Whitaker, our planning director.
Next question. So when we're talking about the Highland Avenue district here, this goes from where to where on Highland?
Essentially on, if you're going from east to west, essentially starting with the Lytle Broad intersection on the extreme west side of the study area. We figured that would be a good place to start on the west side because of the impact of the Judicial Center and of the new roundabout and intersection of Lytle and Broad. And as you head east and you skim the north of downtown and then head towards North Manny Avenue, North Highland Avenue, and then continuing with Lytle eastward towards the university all the way to Middle Tennessee Boulevard, there are already some arts uses in the area, arts and education uses that we can build on. Of course, as I mentioned, Middle Tennessee State University's purchase of the old hospital building, they are already working on a build out in that building for the Chinese Arts and Culture Center in that building. Of course, we have the Murfreesboro Little Theater. We have the Rutherford County Historical Society's reuse of the old Ransom School on North Academy Street. So these are already some great building blocks for the area. And we feel that, as I mentioned with the old medical zoning that in many instances is antiquated, this is a great opportunity to see what this area can become. We look at potential uses such as small neighborhood commercial uses such as ice cream shops as a potential, flower shops, and also an opportunity for artists to have a place where they can live and work and have their studio in their homes. So we think that the potential for this area for revitalization is great, and we are really excited about this study.
Matthew, at the end of this study, I mean, from what I read here, we're going to end up with what? A map that shows us, somebody could potentially come in and put in an art studio here, or somebody could potentially do this, or are we going to end up with some sort of a strategy that says somebody could put this in here, and this is how we would incentivize them to do that because we've all decided that that's what needs to be in this area, or based on the
it'll be a collaborative process in the contract that Reagan Smith has provided. It shows there's going to be a great deal of public input. There are going to be workshops where the public will get an opportunity to voice their ideas about what the area could be. At the end of the day, one of the end products for the area will be a future land use map. And that future land use map will be more detailed than the future land use map that is being done with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan provides a big picture guide with its future land use map. With a small area study like this, it zeroes in on a specific area of town and goes parcel by parcel, looking at more specifically at what those specific parcels could be.
Have we adopted the bigger picture land use plan? I mean, I know the answer to that. So we have not adopted the big picture land use plan, so why would we already be doing the detailed plan that we haven't even adopted, that we even say this is what this is going to be?
Well, both consultants will be working hand in hand on this. It's part of the project will be for Reagan Smith to work with Kendig Keast so that the two plans are consistent with each other.
But what if we decide we don't want it to be the cultural arts district? Then we just spent $75,000 to detail out some stuff that we, I mean, I'm not trying to be antagonistic here, I'm just, we haven't gotten there yet.
That's what we're calling it right now, but the plan is malleable right now. When the plan goes out to the public, I think the public will help shape the study area as well as what the potential for the area will be. And I think Mr. Whitaker has some additional comments.
Mayor, Council, Mr. Lance, part of the reason we started the study is partly the 2035 plan, but the redevelopment of our downtown is going to happen regardless. We've had a tremendous amount of interest downtown. Probably there's not a week goes by that I don't get a call about wanting to redevelop areas. What we have now is really improper zoning. After the medical clinic is left, medical is not going to come down to the Highland area. We know that. It's pretty much left. So what we're trying to do with the study is figure out how we want it to redevelop. I'm not sure we or Reagan Smith has a preconceived plan right now. What we want is the input. We do the study, we do the cost analysis of the property, we look at it, and then we come up with a plan. But what we want to do is develop it in the right way, in the right manner, then have people come in, buy property, and have a hodgepodge of development. This gives us a roadmap to a good, solid development downtown. And like I said, the downtown area, we really probably should have done this a year ago because we are seeing a lot of interest. The Judicial building, everything that's happening downtown has really spurred a lot of interest, and developers are coming down and wanting to invest money. And so we want to make sure that we develop it in the proper manner.
On our agenda here, it says consider recommendations for a contract to conduct a small area study and develop a land use plan for the Highland Avenue Cultural Arts District. So is what they're going to do going to be to develop what needs to happen in order to make this a cultural arts district, or are they going to look at it and see if just a cultural arts district fits, or are they going to see what might fit, period?
What might fit, period. We've named
Why
it
are
the
we
culture.
calling it?
We call it the Cultural Arts District. We may find out when we do our study, when we have our input, that may not be the case. But we have another study that Don will present here in a moment, and we call it the Lower Broad Study. That the coin of the name may change. Right now, what we're trying to figure out is what needs to go where, how.
Well, you understand the difference.
Yeah, I do.
Broad is just
and if I could back up and take cultural arts out of it, we wouldn't have the conversation. It may not be the cultural arts. One of the reasons we did that is because you do have the little theater. You have things in that area that lend and trend. And part of what we know we need downtown, as planners, we do know that we need small businesses. We've had small artisans wanting to come downtown and buy a house and maybe have an art studio in it. I'm not sure currently our zoning will allow that. So, I mean, but we will have to do some research, and that's part of what we do. As Matthew said earlier, the 2035 plan gives us the big picture. Then you have to look at local area studies. We really don't need to wait until the 2035 plan is completed for this, because we have people wanting to redevelop the downtown, and we need to study as quickly as possible, really, so we'll know how to develop it properly. And the last thing we want to do is start redeveloping our downtown incorrectly, because once people develop, spend money, it's a 50-year or better decision that we're making.
Will it be a 2017, the end of 2017? I know you're going to fund it out of two years' budgets. Is it the end of the year that we should expect this to?
Well, we have actually budgeted for 2 years, but it may not take that long once we get into the study. I'd rather give us adequate time for the study and fund the study properly, and hopefully we come in under budget and come in beforehand. The contract, actually, we put money in there, but it's basically a not to exceed and timeline. So we may get finished, and the reason I want to do the Lower Broad study hand in hand is they're very similar studies. To do them both at the same time with all the redevelopment just makes sense, and they will help each other, in fact.
So the $153,000 price tag is just an estimate? It's not?
Well, for the first year, we plugged in $75,000 for the first year of the study. And if we completed the study, then we would complete the study.
I thought Reagan Smith had a budget in here of $153,000.
We have modified the contract actually to not to exceed, and he's here right now if you like to, but we had actually modified that
Oh,
contract.
okay, so it's not a...
Yes, sir.
Not a firm figure, okay.
Yeah, it's basically a not to exceed and time material type
Great.
contract.
Gary, I'm going to tell you, I think this is a great idea. And the reason I say that is because with the Lytle Street development, with the Judicial building, with MTSU got going all along this corridor, and the opportunity to give an economic boost and even potential incentives for it to have an economic boost is a correct move for our city. It's an area that has potential of becoming blighted in the middle of a bunch of new development. And I think if we can give them direction and we can say this is what we have zoned it for and make it more feasible for those people to come in with the proper zoning instead of having to come in with the current situation where they might want to put an art studio but it might not be zoned for it. I think this is an excellent opportunity, and I commend you for having the vision and foresight to go in this direction.
Well, we like I said, we want to do it correctly and have a good plan. This is the only way we can do it is through this study, and I can honestly say there's not a week goes by that we don't have people coming in wanting to redevelop our downtown, and we need to take advantage of that, and in my opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we struggled for many years trying to get the square going, and the square seems to have been fairly successful now. There's an energy up there. There's a really good vibe up there at night. The businesses that are there in the daytime still seem to be fairly successful. You go into many cities now at smaller towns that have squares that are just absolutely dead, and downtown areas that have no activity. And as we look at these millennium people that are millennium people, I probably didn't say that right, but the people who are coming out right now who are looking at properties and stuff, who are looking and thinking more of an urban environment, the city of Murfreesboro is changing, and it's not the little town that it once was, and some of that's good, some of that's bad, but for us to be proactive and look at the opportunity to organize this and have it done in a planned manner, that's exactly what I think our planning department's responsibility is, and I admire you for taking this on because it's a big challenge.
Well, thank you, and we have had a tremendous interest in people wanting to move downtown because walkable neighborhoods, and there's no better walkable neighborhood than our downtown.
Need to move for approval.
Any questions for Mr. Whitaker? If there's no more questions, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We'll consider for recommendation as the principal planner to contract with Reagan Smith Associates to conduct a small area study and develop a land use plan for Lower Broad area.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Donald Anthony, and I'm a principal planner in the planning department. I've been there for about 5 months. I work primarily with the Board of Zoning Appeals, but it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. We're very excited about the prospect of partnering with Reagan Smith Associates to conduct a study of the Lower Broad area. This area extends from Old Fort Parkway to the Discovery Center and from Broad Street to the railroad track. The area has a mix of commercial and industrial uses and is, in our estimation, vastly underutilized. We think that underutilization, along with the prime location and the potential for daylighting and enclosed stream in the area, make this area perfect for a revitalization study. The study will be guided by a steering committee consisting of community members and city leaders, and Reagan Smith has committed to conducting a series of stakeholder interviews and open houses to gather feedback from the community. This study will be spread across 2 fiscal years, and tonight we are asking that you authorize the $75,000 contract that will allow Reagan Smith to begin work on this project. Thank you.
Clarkson.
Mr. Caldwell.
I'm glad it was called up.
Well, I know this company has been on the planning commission from 1993 to 2002. I want to say Reagan's, I've had nothing but excellent results from y'all's work. And I know you know that the Water and Sewer Department has a stormwater project that is going to encompass that area. Do you know what I'm talking about?
We will know what you're talking about, yes. Yeah, I mean, we will have a significant, data gathering part phase of this and getting your maps and getting with every department to understand the area. And one of the other things I wanted to add to kind of what's been said, one of the exciting things I'm excited about, in addition to the public input process too, we're going to have a marketing study done for both of these areas as well, and that's going to help guide us as well to make sure what we are proposing, that there's a market there for it as well. So we're taking public input, we're doing a marketing study, we're taking guidance from the staff, we're taking guidance from the leadership, and pull all that together and creating an implementable plan that's going to work for the city, in the for now and the future. So that we'll be looking at all those components, as we develop both of these plans. And I appreciate the kind words. I'm very excited as a resident of Murfreesboro to be working on this.
I am too. Something that was mentioned in regards to this study that wasn't mentioned in the other was the community group. I forgot exactly how you...
Steering committee?
Steering committee.
Yes.
Yeah, the steering committee. Is that going to be a part of the other study as well?
It will. It will. And we'll get with the staff, and I'm sure they'll get with you in establishing who will be who will be good members for that. As part of our team, too, we have Terry Sterling with Sterling Communications, who lives in the Highland Avenue area, knows that area well. So we have some good local representation on our team to understand, the players in the area and all that, and involve them in the process. So that was a key part of, we added her to that as well, and some other strong planning expertise that brings some good urban planning to the table and experience as well, and some experience with form-based codes and other possible tools of how we can implement this in the future, and other strategies to get investment in the community. So we feel we have a good team in place for the projects.
If you're looking at the long-term vision of what could happen for the link, the overall kind of pedestrian link and whatever's back and forth to downtown, and how easy that would make it available for maybe some folks that may want to have some apartments and some living spaces downtown to go back and forth.
Yes.
I'm excited. I concur with Councilman Smotherman. I think if you look at the big picture and the long-range plan, it has to happen. You can't nickel and dime these things. You're looking at trying investment for downtown, keeping it viable, growing it. And with all the links and the Bradley Academies and Oakland's mansions and the central, those new developments, they're going to do okay. They'll be fine, but don't leave your downtown behind.
Mm-hmm. And these two studies really are two things that have grown out of our comprehensive plan effort. While that is still underway, the ideas that have come up about the Bottoms or Lower Broadway or Highland Avenue all came out of community input and the comprehensive plan and the task force and you all.
And I know you're saying that it came out of the plan, the 2035 plan, but really, where we're sitting used to be the Bottoms. I mean, and we're at the base of the mink slide. I mean, historically speaking, this area right here was about as poor and as bad as it could get. I mean, it was swampland, it was shacks, it was a pretty rough area, and you can see what City Hall, I think, has done to stimulate this area as far as keeping downtown and that shot of stimulus. One side of the square we're doing it, this side of the square again, to be able to connect the Discovery Center to Cannonsburg with that stream and potentially a walking path that would go follow it, more of a park area to add that into our city. In the downtown area. I mean, to me, it sounds like a dream come true to be able to go in there and put urban dwellings in there and to spur life back into a community, a downtown area that needs a shot of stimulus. And I think the last item and this one are just great things to be happening in our city.
Mr. Caldwell, is there any difference in how you approach the first one as how you approach the second one?
Well, I mean, public input is going to drive a lot of what we do, on that. So it's basically the same project approach with each project. Obviously one area is a little bit bigger than the other. You have a different set of stakeholders, but the beauty of doing these both at the same time, the market study is going to look at both areas, at the same time. So that's going to be beneficial, and we may hear some from the other stakeholder groups in the other area about the other projects. So it's I don't know if that answers your question, but again, I think it's a good opportunity to do both these at the same time. I think it's as Gary said, there's a lot of pressure in both those areas with some development interest. So now's the time to plan for it.
Any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll consider recommendations of the principal planner. Schedule public hearings to consider annexation, 1 annexation plan of services, 2 annexation petition, 3 zoning along Blackman Road, 1 annexation plan of services, annexation petition along Foxfire Court. Ms. Green.
Thank you. During its regular meeting on November 4th, 2015, the Planning Commission conducted public hearing on 3 matters and are recommending their approval to you. They are for the annexation plan of services and the annexation petition for approximately 70.1 acres located along Blackman Road, Benjamin Sykes and Thomas Meadows applicant. Also for the zoning application for approximately 53 acres located along Blackman Road to be zoned CH simultaneous with its annexation and CF simultaneous with the annexation. Benjamin Sykes and Thomas Meadows are the applicants. And the third item is the annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 5.96 acres located along Foxfire Court with Linda Smith as the applicant. All 3 public hearings were held that evening, and Planning Commission is recommending approval, and you should schedule a public hearing for these items.
What date?
I would recommend January 7.
First public hearing of 2016.
Yes, sir.
The planning commission will be
And that is also the first Thursday when, so it would normally be our first first council meeting of the month, too, on the first Thursday.
Okay.
January the what?
January 7th.
January 7th.
Move we set public hearings January the 7th.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll consider, thank you, Ms. Green. We'll consider recommendations of the city engineer and the transportation director. First Amendment to Memorandum of Understanding MOU with MTSU for the widening of the Middle Tennessee Boulevard.
Good evening, Mayor McFarland, members of City Council. Chris Griffith and myself will be presenting 4 separate items related to what I would term our long-suffered project, being the Middle Tennessee Boulevard reconstruction between Main Street and Greenland Drive. The roots of this project go back to 1995, actually, and I have provided you on your desk a handout that looks like this. It really gives a history and the funding and so forth for this project. One of the main reasons for the length of this project was that the city of Murfreesboro back in 1995 was pursuing a project that was in our major thoroughfare plan, which is basically the widening of Middle Tennessee Boulevard between Greenland and Main, just as a pretty standard 5-lane road with bike lanes and sidewalks. We went through a lot of the process for the design and even held some public meetings, and MTSU at that point in about 2002 approached us with a request that maybe we reconsider the project as designed and looked at something on a more grander scale, and including some components, aesthetic components, such as medians, landscaping, and some other improvements that were not in the original project. If you look on that, there are the arrows down the left side of that page that show the division between the road that we were looking to design is the 5-lane road and what we now have before us as a 4-lane median divided road. And in between that, you will notice a gap of about 6 years. Part of the conversation with MTSU was that this would be a project that would cost quite a bit more than what we had anticipated, and as such, if they would work to find some additional funding to make up that funding gap, that we would certainly be willing to reconsider our project and go and look at the project that they had proposed. And they worked with Congressman Gordon's office and actually got a substantial amount of federal funds earmarked through one of the transportation bills to apply to this project. So once the funding was substantially in place, we picked the project back up in 2008, and you will see that there on that sheet that there are a substantial amount of processes that we have gone through over the years to get to the point that we are today. And I certainly would like to thank Dr. McPhee, John Cawthorn, Patty Miller, and their staff, and also Congressman Gordon for the work that they've put into that to get us to the point that we are today. I've also provided you on your desk a handout that shows the funding, the division of this. I provided a large handout. The numbers have gotten so small on my 8.5 and 11, I have to print it out this way myself, and I'm pretty sure you probably couldn't read it on your computer screen. But this gives you an idea of the multitude of funding sources and the matches that come from various sources between MTSU and the city that gets us up to the point that we are today to have a fully funded project. The project in general, as has been bid, considering all the phases being, and if you look at table 4 on that sheet, you'll see that all the phases being the engineering, right-of-way, and construction totals a little over $18 million. And that is in the participating cost. There is other funds involved in that. That is what we term as non-participating cost, and that's a little over $2 million additional, but that is basically pass-through money wherein, for instance, the Water and Sewer Department and Atmos Energy would be having part of this constructed on their behalf, but they would pay the contractor directly for that, so it's not really a project cost that's part of the sheet that you would see in table 3 and 4. To get to where we need to go this time, we need to redo the funding agreement that we had with MTSU originally that incorporates these changes and the participation between MTSU and the city of Murfreesboro. As you notice in table 3, there are various funding sources that are associated with this. The federal funding is about $12.6 million. The local funding on behalf of MTSU is about $5 million, and the city's local cash funding is about $662,000. Now, on top of the cash that we put in it, the city also put some of our annual federal allocations that come through the Federal Highway Administration into that, and that totals about, the cash and that totals about $6 million. So what we're really looking at is to fully fund this project. The earmark funds are the funds that are put into this project that are not from MTSU or the city is about $7 million or 39%. The cash that MTSU is actually putting in this project is about $5 million, and the cash that the city of Murfreesboro and including our federal allocations is about $6.2 million. So it's fairly evenly distributed among the participating entities in funding this project. This has been changed in your MOU to reflect the funds that MTSU is putting in this project. And with that, I would recommend the approval of the first MOU between the City of Murfreesboro and MTSU.
Okay, without putting you on the spot, Mr. Richardson, see that second column?
In second column in which table?
He's looking at the front sheet there.
Yeah, I'm looking at the very front sheet. The second column, you got federal, state, City of Murfreesboro, Rutherford County, other.
Are you talking about this small sheet?
Yeah, that one.
Okay, thank you.
Why is that? It's second column.
You talking about the state? The state did not participate in this project. This is not a state route, and they were not interested in participating in this. So really, it became a project between matching the federal funds with city and MTSU with no state participation.
That makes sense. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Mr. Richardson, you better hurry up before this thing gets away from us.
I will promise you that over the last 2 weeks, Mr. Griffith and myself have been on the phone constantly trying to take care of all the balls that were up in the air and trying to get this tied out, and hopefully y'all are the last ball in the air.
We ready for a motion? So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Mr. Wright, call the roll.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Yes.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye.
Thank you.
Move to item B, contract for reconstruction and widening of Middle Tennessee Boulevard.
Now that Mr. Richardson has gotten us the money, I'll spend it.
Plus some.
You got a change order ready yet?
I was going to say something, but I caught myself and said I'm not going to say anything to it
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
We'll wait till it gets started.
I'm sure it was uplifting. As Mr. Richardson has mentioned, this project is a joint effort with Middle Tennessee State University and the state of Tennessee for improvements to a section of Middle Tennessee Boulevard extending from East Main Street to Greenland Drive. I've attached a copy of the site map for your review. The intent of the improvements to the roadway is to add a turn lane, raised median, and improve pedestrian facilities. Pedestrian facilities include bike lanes, stamped asphalt crosswalks, and plaza areas at intersections. The project also includes aesthetic improvements, including landscaping of the median and relocating overhead utilities to underground. 2 bids were received on October 8th for the construction of the improvements. The corrected low bid totaling the amount of $15,741,549.87 was submitted by Civil Constructors from Franklin, Tennessee. However, while submitting the required bid information to TDOT for review, staff was informed that Civil Constructors has been suspended by FHWA as part of a civil settlement agreement. The project includes, as Mr. Richardson mentioned, substantial federal funding, which consequently disqualifies Civil Constructors from being awarded the contract. Therefore, staff has forwarded a recommendation and subsequently received a concurrence from TDOT to award the contract to the second bidder, which was Jarrett Builders from Nashville, Tennessee, with a corrected bid total of $15,786,359.60. A copy of the bid tabulation is included for your review. Jarrett does have a unlimited contractor's license with the state and specializes in excavation and utility construction. And in addition, they have listed several subcontractors that have completed projects successfully with the city, including Hoover, Reed Landscaping, and Superior Traffic Control, to name a few. Our consultant, Weiser Company, has reviewed the information and recommends award of the construction contract to them. The funding has been described by Mr. Richardson, and we therefore recommend Jarrett Builders subject to review and approval of the agreement by the city attorney.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Mr. Wright?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Contract for amendment for design services on Middle Tennessee Boulevard.
The City Council approved the contract with Weiser Consultants to provide consulting services on this project on your meeting April 23rd of 2009. The original administration was based on an 18-month, construction administration was based on an 18-month schedule. After completion of the design and obtaining information about construction sequencing, it was determined that a 30-month construction schedule would be necessary to complete the project. Consequently, staff requested and received the attached fee schedule for the revised construction administration services. Based on our experience with the improvements to Joe B. Jackson Parkway, which is a similar TDOT local programs project, staff decreased the amount of engineering oversight from Weiser and remove geotechnical testing from their contract. The geotechnical testing is proposed in the following item. The daily construction inspection service was increased in accordance with the revised actual construction duration. This increased the construction administration fees from $712,210.27 to $1,086,603.59. Staff recommends approval of the amendment with the contract subject to approval from the city attorney.
30 months?
Yes, sir.
That's what I wrote down.
Might be the single biggest project the city's ever done before this is over with.
But it's a much-needed one. Anybody that's ever traveled Middle Tennessee Boulevard understands that this road is much outdated, and it's time for improving it.
Is that in the form of a motion?
I'll put that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Contract for geotech observation and testing services. Mr. Griffith?
Final item is for the testing services for the contract. On July 28th, the engineering department received a statement of qualifications and letters of interest from 3 consulting firms to perform geotechnical testing and testing services during the construction of Middle Tennessee Boulevard. After reviewing the qualifications of each firm, as well as a review of prior performances, staff recommended TTL to perform the desired services. TTL is experienced with TDOT-specific projects and previously performed geotechnical services for the city on Joe B. Jackson Parkway and numerous additional projects. On November 3rd of 2015, TTL submitted a fee proposal to perform these services for $352,350. I do have a correction to the letter, and I'll provide it. TTL did not actually perform the testing services on Joe B. Jackson, but they have on numerous projects here in town. With that, I recommend approval of the contract with TTL to provide materials testing for the project.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Griffith. Thank you all for all your hard work on this, and really also want to appreciate Mr. Richardson for agreeing to stay along with the city until this project is finished. So I know his retirement date's coming along at some point, so thank you, Mr. Richardson.
30 months.
He's not getting out on good behavior.
Et cetera, et cetera.
And now that that has been memorialized.
His tie over there. I don't know what's going on.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. If the media wants to report that, that's great too. All right, we'll move to recommendations of the Fire Rescue Chief with a settlement agreement with Spartan Motors USA.
Mayor and Council, this agreement with Spartan Motors is to alleviate some issues that we've had with an apparatus that we purchased back in 2007. A 4x4 apparatus that was purchased at that time. We've had numerous issues with that piece of equipment. The truck was a Crimson fire apparatus. Crimson, the corporation, was actually purchased by Spartan Motors about 3 or 4 years ago. So Spartan Motors kind of inherited the issues that we had with the truck from Crimson as the purchase of the company took place. Numerous attempts over the last several years, warranty issues and other issues to resolve a lot of the problems with the apparatus have been unsuccessful. I spoke with the president of Spartan Motors shortly after I became the fire chief here, and we kind of talked about some resolutions with this apparatus. This particular apparatus has been sitting out of service at our fleet shop for the past 14 to 15 months. It has been in service less time than it has been out of, or it's been out of service less time than it has been in service since 2007. It's got operational issues that include not engaging into pump gear. which will not let the truck flow water on fire scenes coming out of pump gear, and also discharge pressures increasing on the pump, which is very dangerous. I would not allow this truck to be put into service by any regard with the issues that it's had if we were to keep this, if we were to have to keep this truck. We have worked out a settlement agreement with Spartan Motors, and where they are giving us $100,000 credit of this apparatus toward the purchase of another apparatus from them. They are also discounting the apparatus that we would purchase from Spartan Motors as part of this settlement agreement. I feel like it's a very fair and equitable resolution to the issue, since we are so far down the road on this. They've inherited the issue, and we've had so many problems over the years. The contract has been negotiated. I appreciate Adam Tucker and legal department for helping work on that contract. Been doing that for about the last week and a half to 2 weeks, but it is my recommendation that we enter into the settlement agreement with Spartan Motors to resolve the issues that we've had with this apparatus.
Chief, will the next piece of equipment you buy come from Spartan? Or
this truck will come from Spartan as a settlement agreement. This will give us an opportunity to evaluate how the company's doing under the new branding of Spartan Motors instead of Crimson Fire Apparatus. This will give us a good opportunity to evaluate that and see how well they're building apparatus and make sure we're not going to have the same issues with that truck. And I meant to mention the actual funding for this apparatus is from funding from the 2010 capital improvement plan, where we had financial savings on other purchases.
savings.
Chief, I know it was before your time, but do you know what the initial cost of the piece of equipment was?
I think it was in the
$280,000.
You're getting a half price off.
So we're getting about two-thirds of it back.
Yeah, well, it's the $100,000 credit, but as the chief mentioned, the price of the apparatus that we'll receive was pretty heavily discounted, so they did not charge us full price on that either. So this took a good long period of time. Hate that it took this long, but we feel like this is a good resolution to get that piece of equipment needs to go back to them, and I know the firefighters feel the same way.
Certainly, I agree with you on getting rid of the piece of equipment that's not working if it's putting people's lives in danger. But I'm sure you negotiated the best deal you feel like you can possibly get. But I feel kind of like Doug. I think with his question, I'm not sure that purchasing another piece of equipment from Spartan after having a bad experience with a piece of equipment that come from their predecessor company is a great idea. But we may wind up in the same situation again is my fear. But
was your experience with Spartan? I mean, do you have any experience with Spartan aside from the old company that we bought it from?
Well, before Spartan purchased Crimson, they've been building the chassis, custom chassis for other apparatus manufacturers such as Laverne, or the last trucks that we just purchased. They built the chassis for those apparatus for a long time. So we have several Spartan chassis in our fleet. The body and the pump components and stuff were not manufactured by Spartan, but by Laverne or Crimson or other people. Crimson was actually built on Spartan chassis as well. So Spartan has got a pretty good name since they took over for Crimson. Crimson, we have several Crimson trucks. This one truck was the only one we had issue with. This truck was a commercial chassis truck. It was designed with pump and roll capabilities to where it could spray water on the fly for like a wildland fire, and it also had 4x4 capabilities. And I would adhere that the problems are probably more due to the commercial chassis and trying to marry that commercial chassis with that type of pump apparatus and those things than I would the actual company itself. We have several other Crimson apparatus that are functioning very well at this time.
Does the new apparatus come in with a warranty? Is there something?
Yes, it does come with full warranty, just as all of our other apparatus do. It is warranted, and the company has assured us that we will be pleased with this truck.
Move for passage.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Consider recommendations of the city attorney with hiring a consultant for telecommunications related matters. Mr. Strauss.
Yes, Mayor and Council, thank you. we are experiencing I would call it a rash of requests and for installation of fiber optic cable, combination of going underground within the right-of-way and also being installed as pole attachments on the poles of MED. We're also getting a number of requests for installation of what's called small cells throughout the city. Okay, if you're not a little familiar with that term, of course, we're all familiar with cell towers that are anywhere from 100 to 300 feet up in the air and have a variety of antennas hanging on them. Those provide coverage for a 10, 15 or so mile radius, maybe more than that in some cases, depending on the terrain. What the world is experiencing, and particularly this country is experiencing, is a capacity issue that's much greater right now than the coverage issue. All our smartphones and tablets and the data we want and the constant use that we want require a carrying capability that is rapidly disappearing. So to put the small cells, and the small cells anywhere from the size of a shoebox to the size of maybe a 20-gallon trash can, and they can, depending on which it is, some of them can be installed on the tops of telephone poles or power poles. Some can be hung on the sides of power poles. Some are hung on street lamps, street light poles. Others have been put on traffic signal poles. Some are even put on buildings, on the corner of a building or on the rooftop. The regulation of this industry is rapidly changing. The industry itself is rapidly changing. It wasn't that long ago that we had a telephone, which everyone knew what that was, and we had cable television, and everybody knew what that was. And then Al Gore invented the internet on us, and it was considered to be a separate, completely separate industry, a separate function. Well, those three are rapidly merging, and it's difficult to tell what's what these days. We feel a need on two levels. Number one is to not have the city get sued because we've denied somebody a request that we're obligated to give them. And almost as important, maybe more important, is that we set ourselves up so that we can receive appropriate compensation from these companies for the use of our right-of-way, for the use of our power poles, light poles, any other facility that they do use. We are not allowed to set up a standard 5% or even 1% franchise fee, as we were allowed to do with the cable television people who wanted to come into our cities. But we can recover reasonable costs, and we can recover the cost of maintaining the right-of-way and providing them with a facility for their services. So I'm proposing that we retain Henry Walker at the firm of Bradley Arendt, Bolt Cummings. Henry was general counsel of the Tennessee Regulatory Commission for 12 years, and he's spent about 35 years in the general utility industry, public utilities, and a very large part of that has been in the telecom industry. He is in Nashville office and is available to work with us, and has also the backing of about 400 other lawyers in that law firm. So anything that we would need in that area, I'm confident that we can get the support that we need so that we stay out of trouble and make recover the costs and benefits that we can from the use of our right-of-way. So with that, we'd recommend approval of this retention. And also that we haven't established an amount yet or a percentage, but MED will be sharing in the cost of this, because obviously part of this is going to apply to the attachments to their poles. So we'll work that out in the future, but the MED, the Power Board yesterday did agree to participate with the city in this retention if the council approves it. Funding for this will come out of the legal department's outside services budget.
You guys got any questions?
I'll move for approval.
Well, I agree where you're coming from. I don't understand, why would MED participate financially in the project?
Because he will be helping with the pole attachment agreements, and they're very, they're currently attaching fiber optic cable to MED's power poles.
Okay. And there should be an attachment fee for that.
There is.
Okay.
But there will be also agreements for that with a variety of provisions that he'll be helping with. They'll also, no doubt, be attaching some small cells, the small cell devices themselves, to MED poles or perhaps their buildings, and so they will benefit from his expertise and from his counsel with us. And again, we haven't established the percentage fee. I think that Mr. Saxon and I will be able to kind of work that out as we go, get at least some good idea of what percentage of the effort is going toward their facilities and what's going toward other city facilities.
Gotcha.
Okay.
You got a motion out there?
Have a motion?
Got a motion. Do we need the second, too? Or we need a second?
Did you
I thought I seconded it.
Okay, motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet. Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. City Council discussion on proposed 2015 City Manager Performance Evaluation. Mr. Godwin?
Good evening, Mayor McFarland and members of City Council. Once again, this evening is a communication to you about the information that was provided earlier in October of this year. Just as a reminder, the City Manager's annual performance review has been conducted since 2001. In 2013, Council expressed an interest in a revision to the appraisal format. And what's before you this evening is the combination of that review, some benchmarking that took place in 2013 and 14, as well as further consideration from the International City Managers Association, International City Managers and County Managers Association. What you have before you tonight, in fact, is a replication of those professional competencies as identified by ICMA. So you'll sort of see a different look under the hood of the appraisal format itself, and you'll see much the same formatting in terms of how the appraisal is completed. So your consideration this evening, you will see, again, the results of that conversation that took place back in 2013 till present. I might point out that Mr. Lyons, who is a credentialed city manager within these particular guidelines, is certainly knowledgeable of every single one, as is Mr. Crumley and Ms. Moody. And it only fits in terms of the recommendation that these particular competencies, which, as a reminder, City Council has been through in a previous card sort for positions like the recruiting profile for the city attorney, would further illustrate to drive performance and development within the profession. But importantly, in 2013, I decided to conduct a review of the benchmarking of the application of these competencies against the current competencies in the 2001 review, and made the recommendation to Mayor McFarland to have this discussion before you this evening. So my findings are that these competencies are not only refreshed, but further represent the professional development of the ICMA as established, and further enhancing the performance and also the communication with the city manager. The other addition to the form includes a condensed rating rubric from a factor point of 1 to 10 to 1 to 4, and that is seen as a best practice in the International Personnel Management Human Resources Association. The other thing you'll notice, back in 2013, City Council asked for areas to complete goal attainment sections that can be placed, if you will, into the narrative at the conclusion of the evaluation. So again, the form before you tonight is a combination of work that's been taking place behind the scenes since 2013. In my cover communication this evening, we have talked about some proposed dates of completing the proposed evaluation form as is by December 1st, with a aggregation back to you 2 weeks afterward on the 14th, And of course, we'll need to schedule a public meeting to cover the actual evaluation at a date to be determined. It was thought, again, because of the preliminary reaction in October of this format, that might be suitable for council's review. And I am available, of course, to answer your questions at this time.
I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
You sent something September the 10th. Is that the document that you're referring to? And
Yeah.
there hasn't been any changes since then?
Correct. There have not been changes since that time. These 18 competencies are the same ones that were
Same
sent
one.
at that time.
And the one that there is a evaluation for 2015 that's in front of that's the old?
It is. It was a 1 to 10 scale with the 13 competencies that have been in place since 2001.
Really, the goal on this, and with council's approval, I would like to see us get to trying to shift this now where the review would be, I think the date I had looking at it was if we could do like a 5:30 meeting on January the 7th before our council meeting. But what would be, I think, more productive is to do a January review, which would be sort of a first-year review or first-of-the-year review, and then go and do another review in July. So we're doing it a couple times a year, and we're, instead of trying to review what happened the last 12 months, we're really looking at blocks of what's happened the next 5 or 6 months. And if we look at if we did a review sometime in July, we've made it through the budgeting session. So that way we can review how the past budgeting session went. Then when we pick up and review in January, that helps us look at where we've been, since then. The other thing I think that would be beneficial, we've got in the back, we've got 4, our goals that we go by: safe and livable neighborhoods, economic development, so we can rate how we're doing on there. But I think what would also be beneficial that we look at the different departments and for instance, I think a good example this year is we got several different comments and input on brush pickup this year. And so I think that would be something that as we look at the review that we would say, let's come up with a better plan on how we handle emergency service on brush pickup. And Mr. Lyons would come back in the next 6 months and say, this is how I looked at the council, and this is the council's input, and this is how I solved that. So we could really look at each individual department, not necessarily reviewing how the department's individuals are doing, but where we've gotten comments back on things we need to work on with those departments.
Last year when I looked at this first time, we talked about having goals, having something a little more specific. And, it looks to me that this is basically, I know there's some changes and some added features here, but, as far as goals go, we could have just, it seems like this same thing we could have put under other remarks last year. There was a blank space at the end of last year's too that we could have written down, hey, I want better brush pickup or whatever. I guess I kind of had it envisioned that, that we would have some goals that the council, would have that we could, that would be a little more measurable. One of the things on here is define goals. So, if everybody wants to put their own goals on here, okay, I'm just kind of saying that it seems like there would be, generally speaking, some goals that a city council would expect of their city manager that we could measure without us all having to come up with however many goals we want to separately come up with. But is it better to have our own specific ones?
I would certainly think that the collaboration of what goes into the goal statements by the entire council is important. Clearly, if there's 21 goals, that's a lot of goals to manage and to focus in on. But I would think that there would certainly be some consistency in the top 2 or 3 with council.
Yeah, the other thing that I remember was the rating systems when we go on something that says, expectations, whether they meet expectations or exceed expectations. And I guess when we say now it looks like we've changed that to exceed standards or far exceed standards. do we have standards on these things to know, to measure?
It's a great question. The standards refer to the competency themselves. So if you look at each competency, there are some of those being sub-competencies. For example, number 10, budgeting. Council would then need to decide if the level of performance was consistently above what the council set as being standard. So if council determined that meeting the budget for that particular rating period was standard, then that would be an easy decision with respect to what the standard represents.
Yeah, the budget is probably the easiest one because there's actually an objective dollar figure there maybe that you could look at. But stuff like democratic advocacy, what's the standard for promoting democratic advocacy does that mean, I don't know. It's kind of tough for me. What's the standard for diversity?
Citizen service, what's the standard?
That we say.
Yeah, what I find in the competencies themselves is that there are statements that help to foster the behavior that attaches to that particular competency. Not all are as explicit, perhaps, as the budgeting one. But I do think that there are several competencies that are far superior to the previous competencies. For example, relationship with city employees has been one that a number of council members over the past 10 or 11 years after review have generally deferred rating because of the complexity of the relationships in 5 levels of employees. So it's felt that these particular competencies might better represent the actual performance since they represent the credentialing of the city manager.
I think the bottom line is there's no perfect rating scale. And I think trying to get 7 individuals who have different ideas to come up with one goal is going to be hard to do, because what I think, it's very subjective. And so what you may like, I may not like. And so I don't know what I know the last rating system that we had was by far perfect. But, I think
far from perfect.
Yeah, far, well, something like that. It's getting late.
We got you.
Yeah. I think that, what I would envision if we had the thing on the back that would let us go through as we're looking at different areas that we've seen over the year that we need to work on, then, like a good example, Rick, is to say 2 years ago, Parks and Recreation Department, soccer field's in horrible shape. What's our action plan over the next 6 months to be able to fix that? And, I could take or leave the actual rating, but be more measurable on Middle Tennessee Boulevard, 20-year project.
Bridge over Broad Street.
Yeah, Bridge over Broad, we're 6 months behind. So those may be some of the measurable goals that we really could look at on where we are. So, but that may, a lot of it, it's like Doug's saying here, I'm sure if we held Mr. Lyons accountable for the bridge that he has no control over, he'd be out there with a shovel and a mini X trying to, in a hard hat. But I don't.
I'll just tell you this is my take on it, is that this feels like to me the kind of document that isn't written for city council members to try to effectively say, hey, here's what it is, except maybe the blank piece at the end of it. It's fine with me. We can rock on with it, whatever. We'll do whatever. But I'm not going to grade you on a lot of these things because it's, but it's fine. We should be able to achieve what we can achieve with the blank sheets at the end.
Sure.
Yeah, and I agree with Rick. It's hard for me to judge on citizen service and stuff like that. And I do like the fact that we've reduced the scale from 10 choices to 5 choices now, which means we'll probably be marking a lot of 2.5s or 3.5s or something like that. But I think that by reducing those, we'll probably come up with a better number of where we kind of feel like he's performing. I agree with Shane, or the mayor as well, in the sense that I think some of the events that take place during the year are seasonal, and we'll get a huge influx of people who are concerned about something, and to wait a year before we even do the review, it almost means that we've set ourselves up for failure the next year, because you wouldn't, in fairness to the city manager, wouldn't have time to react to get things in place for the next ice storm. And so I think a semi-annual review would be more efficient and be more effective to try and communicate with him the immediate concerns, and not necessarily, something that we're trying to reach back in our memory and decide where that weight on the scale of end to forward.
And Mr. Lyons starts preparing the budget January. So this gives us the opportunity that we review that first week of January, and he gets feedback from all of us to see as they're preparing the budget, instead on 101s that he's hearing from us, here are improvements that we need to think about this year. So I think you bring a great point, Mr. Lance, and it may be something that Mr. Lyons will look at the ratings and know that that's tough for us to look at some of those things, but really focus in more on what our written remarks are and what our goals on the back. But
well, let me make a little comment, because I remember when we first tried to do the original evaluation, because I was a part of doing that on council, and I felt, again, kind of inadequate to evaluate some of these things. But what I learned and appreciate in the new document is this sets the table for some dialogue between employee and employer. And it gives us, even though we may not feel fully competent to evaluate, the level of, all of the different things that are related here, we have the opportunity to have the dialogue with Mr. Lyons as to how important, and we see that happening, and if there is an issue that needs to be addressed in the midst of this evaluation, then it's going to give us that parameters to have the dialogue. So, I guess we shouldn't be so tied to the number as it is. If there is something, this gives us an opportunity to highlight an issue that has come to our attention, and all of us bring a different, what is standard, what would be the standard. All of us are going to bring a different standard to what we would evaluate as the performance level is at. So, some people, I remember last time we did this, there were people that were bouncing up against the 9 and 10s and wouldn't give anything less than that. But if you've ever done an OER in the military, you realize that if you got less than 95, you weren't going to be available for promotion. So, and that didn't say a whole lot about the level of our officer corps. So what I'm saying is, this, I like what you've done. I think it's a very competent way of looking at how we evaluate the work of our city manager, and it sets some, at least for our own evaluation, as to how that could be done better if there's areas that need to be addressed. So I like what you've done. So.
And just so people don't get the perception that we don't talk to Rob on a regular basis, I mean, we go to his office on a weekly or bi-weekly basis anyways to talk to him and say, hey, we've got a problem with, the brush on the street at, 707 Wood Hill Drive. But we certainly, I think this is the time that we put it in writing, the bigger goals and the bigger picture, because maybe this is more of a 2035 type thing that we're trying to say. These are goals that we want to accomplish over a larger period of time, and it's not just something that has a quick fix to it where we can call somebody and take care of it.
I agree. I think there should be a category for dress as well. because I don't know if y'all seen Rob with wearing his skinny ties on Fridays. I think that would be something that would need to be evaluated as well. Yeah. Does this look okay? And can we get a motion for January 7th at 5:30 to do the...
You know there's a public comment at 5:45, at
6:45. Yeah, I think we should be able to get everything done in an hour and 15 minutes.
Mayor, can I just ask
Yes.
a point of clarification? And so that would be for rating with this revised form?
As long as everyone's okay with that. And I would say if we make it through this first one and we don't like it, then let's...
Are we going to come back in July, make it up?
Then do it again in July. We'll set that in at the January meeting.
January 7th, what time?
5:30. 5:30. Do we need a motion for that, or?
So do we have these prepared by then, or have we turned them in to you before that, or what?
You'll get November 29th, you'll get the package, I think's the date on there. And
Yeah, I think we had suggested a turnaround completion date back, proposed December 1st for the evaluation forms, and then we would aggregate those results and back out on the 14th. We can extend that if council wishes to wait until the 7th.
I like that better. The 7th, as opposed to can have the date for completion by the 7th. Could you do that? I mean,
Date for
December 7th?
December 7th.
Date of completion, December 7th.
December 7th for completion, and then hand delivery results back on the 14th. Is that the same?
Sure.
Okay. Very good.
Okay.
It's on the calendar.
Mr. Lance, was that in the form of a motion?
Do we need a motion?
Yes.
Last time I tried that, you slapped my hand. We need a motion here.
That was for a table.
So moved.
So do we use the document that you've given us here?
Yes. Yes.
Will you send another packet, a full packet out to everyone? Or
I will, and just to be clear, in terms of completing goals, it would be my suggestion not to complete that section at this time for this particular review, because you're looking backward in performance, and so the goal should be a forward-looking completion.
Sure.
So we move to have a meeting early on the 7th? Is that what I was making a motion for?
To follow this process, yes.
And have the meeting on the 7th? Do we have to have a... All right.
So we have a motion?
Need a second.
Need a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Mr. LaLance?
Yes.
Mr. Shacklet?
Yes.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We have several beer applications in front of you.
You do. We have an application for a convenience market at 4125 Manson Pike, Suite A, that has already been presented to you. They have now changed managers, and they are ready to move forward with the application. So this is being represented to you. They have not passed their codes inspections yet, but the background check did meet our requirements. On the next page, same set of circumstances, but a different location. This one's at 2015 Mercury Boulevard, same corporate owner, and they also lack finishing their inspections with the building department. We have a new location at 1511 East Main Street. It's for a grocery market, and the background checks meet our requirements. They also have a few inspections to complete. We have a grocery market at 2014 East Main Street. That one is actually an ownership change, and the background check meets our requirements, but they do need to finish their building codes inspections. We have an ownership change for a restaurant at 1845 South Church Street. That background check is in order, but they also need to complete their building inspections. And finally, we have a new location for a restaurant at 352 West Northfield Boulevard, Suite 4F. That's an ownership change, a name change, and the background check meets our requirements, but they also need to finish their codes inspections. So we recommend all of those for approval to be issued upon completion of their building codes inspections and getting the proper paperwork from them. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Will one motion get them all? Or-
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. You have a couple of board and commission appointments for you to review, and we'll look at those at our next meeting. Any statements to be paid?
Yes, Mayor, we have one aviation fuel set of bills that we need to pay. This statement list actually represents several bills.
Mr. Smotherman, would you like to approve the bills being paid?
I'll move we pay the bill.
All right.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We have two items for other business. First is the Habitat for Humanity demolition request.
Yes, sir. We have received a request from Ms. Terry Schultz. They have acquired the property at 207 Richardson Avenue. This property was damaged by fire. Habitat has acquired it. The council, as you will recall, has assisted Habitat numerous times by demolishing a dilapidated structure and then carrying it to the demolition landfill where Rutherford County waives the fee. So our investment in this is really some staff time, but there's no direct expenditure. Afterwards, Habitat would look to build one of their homes here at 207 Richardson Avenue, and we would recommend your approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Anyone have any other business?
I got something.
Anyone?
Chris?
Mr. Griffith? Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. I do have for you tonight contract change order number 1 for the Lyle Street realignment project. Just to prove that we can do it, this is a change order that deducts $15,224 from the existing contract. Once we got into construction, we determined that there was an easier way to complete the storm drainage, and we asked for a price from the contractor, and they gave that to us. The new contract amount will be $2,177,581.10. It does add 30 days to the construction contract, but I will mention that all this work is done actually outside the right-of-way, so it shouldn't affect the local businesses in the area. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Shacklet and I are debating over here, is this a deduct?
Yes.
It's going down.
Yes.
Is this a first? Move for approval.
Second. Motion is second.
Ready?
Ms. Wright?
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Mr. Griffith, you know if we don't aggravate you, then you really know you'll be in trouble one of these days.
Felt like you were mad at me about something. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your hard work. Mr. LaLance?
I just want to bring back up, we had talked about 6 months or so ago about a council retreat, and that's kind of gone off the edge a little bit. I just want to get that back on our table and see how you guys want to handle that. If that one, I just, to me, I thought it was a good idea. I was a little hesitant to try to pay somebody $25,000 to come in and tell us what to talk about, but somehow or another, I'd like for this body to talk about what we want that to look like, when we would want that to be. I'm not sure the best, idea, but I guess in my just general thoughts would be perhaps an afternoon, perhaps stay the night if you guys want. I mean, however that typically works, and then get up and do something till lunch the next day, or
up to 2 days, but
Miami?
maybe one. Maybe one if we want to go early in the morning and come back. I'm just whatever. I think it'd be a good idea for us to try to do some of that kind of stuff and have an opportunity other than in an agenda setting to talk about what some big picture ideas are. And as we go forward, the idea of talking about Rob's evaluation coming back around, January seems to be a clean time to do that, beginning of the year maybe. And as we're, again, he's starting the process on the budget, seems like an awfully good time for us to maybe be strategizing a little bit and devoting some time to that. So really just want to get that out there on the table, and however we want to facilitate that. If, Rob, you want to get that back on your
Sure. Would you be looking for a facilitated type retreat to walk you through some process to identify some goals?
That's what I just wanted. I don't know that I know the answers to it. I just wanted to get it out there, and let's make sure we talk about it again. Sometimes I think sitting around a dinner table and talking things out without somebody telling us what to talk about is a good way to achieve things in a good, transparent fashion. So maybe it'd be a combination of both.
Rob, I remember it was at the Patch.
We went to Parish Patch a number of years ago.
Many years ago, and I don't think we had a facilitator, but I believe we had department heads come and present to us in the midst, what they were looking at, what they saw on the horizon, those kind of things, visioning kind of an exercise. I thought that was very productive. If we think we would need a facilitator, then we might want to think about that.
I think what I recall from that experience was there was a lot of discussion about various city projects. We were very project specific. This park project, that road project. I think when we brought to you the proposal a few months ago that would have been facilitated was more about the council setting some strategic goals, big picture, that weren't necessarily CIP project driven.
I got you.
And so you can do either one. You can do either one with or without a facilitator. It really comes down to what is it that you're trying to achieve with an exercise where you get together to try to build ideas, goals, and vision for the future. It can be everything down to the strategic project level, all the way up to big picture, visioning, change the community, and anything in between. If it would be helpful, I can probably pull together maybe a couple different flavors of what that might look like and then send that out to the council. That might give you a little bit more of a target to shoot at to see what you're looking for.
Is it possible to do, and I don't know, is it possible to do both? Is it possible to have a short-term visioning session maybe to introduce, okay, this is where we are at the current time in the short term, 5 years out, CIP type stuff, and then as we look at what is on the table, then really, have someone guide us through this broader visioning, strategic planning kind of a process?
I think you've got a lot of options. I think from what I'm hearing and kind of experiencing with the council in the past, my suggestion might be that you shoot for the big, where are we going, what are the big things we want to try to accomplish, because if you get that right, then we can build the strategic steps, projects and programs underneath that. But I'd be glad to get you a couple different maybe options and choices that would give you an idea about what could be accomplished, what the cost would be. As I recall, the proposal I brought to you before, I think was in the $10,000 to $12,000 range. And there's things you can do that are more expensive and less expensive. And we can dust that off and maybe come up with a couple other ideas. And in the meanwhile, I know we'll have a short work week next week with Thanksgiving. If you've got some specific ideas or suggestions, that might be helpful as I try to pull together some information to come back to you in 2 to 3 weeks.
Some of the stuff that, I thought we might want to just get out there for you, for all of us tonight is kind of, how much time do we want to try to dedicate to something like that? What time of year do we think is good? Is some kind of, February a good time of year for you guys to try to do that? Do you want to do it during weekdays? Do you want to do it during a weekend? if everybody just be maybe thinking about that a little bit, we can try to drill some of that kind of stuff down, because I think logistics is going to be a pretty major part of this.
And part of what goes into the cost, because I remember, as we're sitting here talking about it, some of this is coming back to my memory. Some of that $12,000 cost wasn't just the day of. We always think about the retreat as the day of, but what that involved were the one-on-one times between the consultant and each of the council members to hear from you, get some of your ideas, consolidate where there were common areas and common themes, and then come to you at a meeting so that you had a lot of that pre-work done and some ideas down that there was agreement, and then you could really focus and go from there. That's where you get into some of the cost features. There's other consultants that can come in if you wanted to just go for a day and a half, and you start from ground zero and you build up from there. And that's why there is a number of different ways that this can be done. And maybe if you get a look at a couple different options, you'll see what might feel right and the direction that you guys want to go.
And I'm not sure that a non-facilitated to start with wouldn't be a good point to start at, because, I mean, I know when we have TML meetings and stuff like that, if we get together for dinner or something after a day of meetings, then basically we generally don't have a problem getting conversations started on what our ideas of where Murfreesboro's been and where we're going. So from the bigger picture standpoint, I'm not sure it even needs facilitation, but it certainly, I look at it from the economic standpoint, I guess, as much as anything. And I think the last time it kind of got carried away when we felt like we were bringing somebody from Arizona or something to come and facilitate it, and we're thinking, we got MTSU here, we got plenty of local people, I'm sure, who could facilitate this. I mean, just the flights involved and everything else, and the one-on-one meetings and everything. It snowballed, and it went from what I thought was a really good idea to begin with to something that I probably had opposition to later on, just because of the expense of it. So, if it's something that we can do from a minimal expense standpoint and still get everybody together to, have a team building type project, so we understand that, hopefully we're all pulling in the same direction and what we need to do to reach those goals. I mean, not direct projects, but I mean, I don't know. What do y'all think?
I think it's a great. You maybe just be. Sorry.
I agree with Mr. Smotherman. I think what's important to Bill may not be important to me, and what's important to you, and we need to kind of prioritize. And sitting down with the press would be. I think it would be useful to the council to do this, and we don't have to spend a lot of money.
Sure.
This body doesn't need a consultant. I mean, most of what this body, in my opinion, need to concern yourself with. You got a 2035 comprehensive plan sitting in front of you, and there's some challenges that somebody is going to have to face with growth and traffic and all that kind of good stuff. We got enough things, major thoroughfare plans and all that kind of good stuff. You got an economics person, a superior person, MTSU can come in and talk about that. You got MTS, you can pull from them. You got TASA, you can pull from them. So because I'm ready to go home. And I think for beating a dead horse, you don't need a facilitator. We got enough issues ahead of this body right now to deal with blight, maybe urban planning, anything. We can figure this out. You don't need anybody to come here and tell you how to figure it out. You fellas know what to do. And, you got your finger on the pulse right here.
Yeah, let's be thinking about it, and then come our first meeting in December, Ms. Shons, if you would put this under other business.
Yes, sir.
And then if that'd work, everybody think about it the 1st of December. Let's start thinking about some dates in maybe February or March that would work. And then, what would a good recommendation is everybody come with at least one topic of something that you want to discuss if we did that, and then we can just have some dialogue. So. And
you got an election coming for August. 3 of us might not be here. I know one that won't, but So take all that into consideration.
Okay. All right. Hey,
Thanks, y'all.
no, it's a great suggestion. I think it would be good, last but not least, that on behalf of the Murfreesboro City Council, that we wish all the residents of Murfreesboro and our staff and employees a happy Thanksgiving. And enjoy a great week next week with your families. We've all got lots to be thankful for. And Mr. Crumley is thankful that he just had another birthday. So,
Anniversary.
4 days in front of me.
with all that, we'll stand adjourned.